massive demand of speakers at the moment. Going on from some questions around Senator Hughes' earlier stuff, I know we can't comment on supply chain demands and stuff like that in regards to slavery, but I know the outcome 1.1 is reduce Australia's greenhouse emissions. What consideration do we give to worldwide emissions when we're looking at our sourcing and our policies and our products? Is that considered, or we only care about what we do in Australia?
Senator, we certainly care about what's happening globally, and a lot of the work that we do through our international partnerships and all of the work we do through the UNFCCC is definitely focused on the global problem. But when we do our own accounts and our sort of construction of our target and how are we tracking towards our target, then the only thing we look at are the emissions that are actually occurring on Australian territory. And I 100% get it. It's fitting into the contextual world frame of where I'm going with this. So my concern is this, that we have, and it fits into this, the electric vehicle strategy, NEVs, and we're talking about increasing the number of, this will be wide-ranging, sorry to keep going up and down, number of electric vehicles on our road. In 2022, 60% of the electric vehicles were manufactured in China. It's now estimated that more than two-thirds are. China has made no commitment to carbon reduction, is that right? No, it's not quite right. If Ms Monroe might come. So they have a different type of commitment to Australia, but they have made commitments. So I'll just let our experts answer that one.
Senator, Gaia Pulliston, Branch Head Strategic Partnerships. So China does have an emissions target. As Ms Evans has said, it's a different type of target to Australia. It's to reduce the carbon intensity of its economy by over 65% below 2005 levels by 2030.
60% by 2030?
Over 65% below 2005 levels by 2030.
Do we monitor that?
Monitor in...
Are there report cards? Does it go to the COP? How do we tick a box or otherwise on their things?
So, Kushal Munro, Head of the International Climate and Energy Division. So that is part of the provisions of the Paris Agreement and transparency and that reporting from countries. So that is a significant thing that all countries, including China, need to do.
Okay, so specifically, when did China make that? When did China make that commitment? Don't know. So I don't expect you to know China's policy inside out.
Yeah, but it is a commitment of the Paris Agreement and the transparency and reporting. So, and that's the difference from what we had under the Kyoto Protocol and the differences between developed and developing countries.
My concern is this: China, as I said, probably making two-thirds of the world's EVs now. They control over 70% of the cathode construction required for the greening and electrification networks. They control 70% of graphite in the world that's essential for all of these things. They're supplying 60% of turbines for wind arrays. Aren't we exporting our pollution to a country that has 28.9% of the carbon emissions of the world?
Well, Senator, I'll have a crack first. It's a very broad question, and you very kindly said that at the start. I mean, there are two issues here. One, the discussion about each country's commitment to Paris, and that constrains each country in what it ultimately can do over the course of the next decades. And so part of the answer to the sort of issue you pose is the fact that there is an international system governed by the Paris Accord which constrains. And so that has its part to play in preventing or mitigating against what you said. Then secondly, of course, there's the interaction between what we do in this country and what, and as you say, what that means in terms of our own domestic industries vis-a-vis what is being done in the rest of the world. It's been a constant issue in Australia as a trading nation. And I think on that is where the government's, and I can't talk about this at length, but just to put it on your radar, I think the government's modern manufacturing fund and strategy is another piece to that puzzle, because I think it understands the issue that you're putting, and so it is a concerted effort to build a greater Australian manufacturing capability and greater resilience in our supply chains than we would otherwise have but for that strategy. And it is done with an eye to those sorts of broader climate and emission issues that you're discussing. So it's a terrific issue that you've raised. And it's very broad, and there'll be a range of really big policy issues at play. But I think, so my best attempt to square it for you in this forum is, at the international level there is constraint on nations and the emissions that they can do in their manufacturing. Australia is similarly constrained, desirous of pushing towards our emissions reduction targets, looking for opportunity in manufacturing to build our own domestic manufacturing capability, which will help deal with that trade-off.
Given we haven't for some time built cars and we're not likely to, that's problematic. I know there's other areas and components. In front of the American Senate Committee last year, it was said by the automotive manufacturers that there is no possibility of slowing the growth of Chinese EV car demands for a couple of years due to their you can't build an EV in the rest of the world without Chinese components for at least a couple of years, given their dominance in the industry. My concern as an Australian lawmaker, as we are here, are our taxpayers, are our consumers, and all these people with these energy policies, which, let's not question any validity of them, be there. Are we subsidising the construction and the industry and the economy of a country that is 28.9% of the world's emitters, is building over 100 coal-fired power stations? Are they benefiting? When do we draw the line? I mean, until they start burning pandas for fuel, when do we care enough that they're emitting, to build our clean technologies? That's my real concern. It is not a worldwide. We've got enough trouble tracking our own 102 measures and what they're doing here and there and for the world. How we construct China is benefiting by using fossil-powered fuels to build our clean energy. How does that rationale in a greener world?
Yeah, so the discussion that we could have at length around the modern manufacturing strategy is part of an answer to that. Another one that I would put to you, Senator, is the critical minerals focus of this nation. And to be fair, that I was the Secretary.
China's got a few of them too.
I was the Secretary of Industry and Resources under the previous government when there was a concerted effort to lean into critical minerals. That continues, and that's because that's a comparative advantage that Australia knows we can develop. So in many ways, at the end of the day, this is an issue where we as a nation are looking for our comparative advantages in the new economy as that economy becomes bound across the world by emissions constraint. So it's a proper exercise to look at some of the challenges, and you've described one, and there will be more. But I think it's also important to look at the opportunities that present as well, which would not be there but for that issue. So I think Australian domestic policy, whether it be in this portfolio, in the resources portfolio, in the industry portfolio, I think Australian domestic policy and policy makers and advisors do have, and have had for some time, a keen eye on understanding other international implications, and where it's able to be mitigated on a sensible, rational basis of comparative advantage.
Okay. Minister, are you aware, or could you take a notice, has there been ministerial level discussions across countries at forums like COP and other things to discuss this, pollution export or transport, or the different levels between them?
So I think the question of which responsibilities are assumed by which countries is a constant source of discussion at the COP. So Australia went to the last COP arguing for, in good company with others, arguing for an increase in ambition, and also for an honest assessment at COP28 about how we were going. Because the big task in the COP work plan that was due to be delivered in December in Dubai was a project, a commitment under the Paris Agreement called the Global Stocktake, which was an assessment about how the world is going in implementing the Paris Agreement. our approach was that we needed that to be robust, honest, and to point the way for the commitments and reforms that will be necessary in coming years to make sure that the world is on track to meet the goals agreed in Paris. So yes, this question about the relative contribution of all of the different nations that participate in the climate discussions is a constant source of discussion. I think the questions you point to in terms of the Australian economy could be expanded to include a couple of additional elements. Our opportunities lie not only in the demand that is generated, in meeting the demand that is generated domestically for low carbon products, but actually in meeting what we know is an enormous growing demand internationally for low carbon products. And so much of the government's work that the Secretary talked you through across different departments is focused on making sure Australia is in the best possible position to reap the opportunities there. One of the big advantages that Australia possesses is that we have both land and substantial renewable resources, and we also have very substantial quantities of critical minerals and other mineral resources that are essential to the transition, not just here but globally. And so making sure that we, over time, build out the infrastructure and the industry capability necessary to really take advantage of all of that and meet not just our own demands, but actually the demands that we know are coming towards us from partners in our region and further afield.
Okay. One last question. Ms Munro, I wonder, on notice not here, could you get me when China made that commitment and how they're going last 2 or 3 years on?
I'll take that on notice.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Sorry, Senator, I just did want to add one extra fact. So the commitment that Ms Paulston's already described as their 2030 or 2035 commitment, China has also made a commitment to get to net zero emissions by 2060.
Yep.
So they might be taking a different trajectory to others, but they have made that commitment.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chair. Hello again.